We are going to discuss about the chapter 4. In this we are going to discuss about the architecture and the difference between the products, ETL products of Informatica, power channel, and also when your source is a flat file, how to create a mapping and how to execute when your source is a flat file. Before that, we are going to review the previous chapter, that is execution process to execute a mapping of source EMP to STG EMP table. In the previous chapter, we have to execute it. We need to create a session, and to create that session, we have to use the Workflow Manager client tool. The Workflow Manager client tool contains three components: Task Developer, Workflow Designer, and Workflow Designer. In the Task Developer, you will create the session. That is a session task, a unit of work. Session is nothing but set of instructions to execute a mapping. So we create a session, assign the mapping, and you cannot execute the session directly in Informatica. To execute the session, you have to create a workflow. The workflow will be created using the Workflow Designer. And to execute the mapping, that is a session, through the workflow, Informatica server needs to connect to the source, and to load the data into the target, it needs to connect. So that is where physically the tables are there in the source and where physically the target table exists. That information has to be provided. That is called as connections. So we create connections for the source and the target and assign in the mapping, in the mapping tab of the session, the source connection and the target connection. They change to bug to normal. Then we execute it. So we also discussed the execution process, that is define the source in the source analyzer, the structure, define the target in the warehouse designer, in the mapping designer create the mapping, and in the workflow manager you create the session, that is the workflow. In the workflow manager, session is nothing but set of instructions. Then you assign the connections to that session. Then you will create a workflow for that session and you execute it. When you execute it, Informatica server, based on the connection information, goes and connects to the source and extracts the data, complete data from the source, puts it in the Informatica server, one record or million records into the Informatica server, and then it does the row by row process, one row at a time according to your mapping. Then inserts the data into the target. How it will insert the data, how will it write insert, that is we set up in the session. Read rows as insert, and the commit interval will be set up in the sessions. Based on that, it will go and insert the data into the target and commits the data. This is the execution process of a mapping to a session, from session to a workflow. And when you execute it, you monitor it in the workflow manager. You access the session log file to see is the loading done or not. Session log file is created for every session, irrespective of success or failure. Then we discussed about creating and executing mappings for the business case 1 STG underscore dealership, that is to extract the data from source dealership and load the data into STG dealership. So to create the mapping, you need to define the structure. You can define the structure manually, or you can import from a database the structure through the designer tool. From the source analyzer, you can import the structure from the database. Structure only, not the data. But to import it from a database, from Informatica Designer tool, you need to connect to a Oracle database You cannot connect directly because it is a third-party tool, so you need to use a ODBC connection. It is a small utility program for the different databases will be provided by Informatica when you install the Informatica client tool. So we created an ODBC connection for the SRC database, and using the user ID password, we have extracted the source structure, imported the source structure through the source analyzer. The same way we imported the target STG_dealership table from the target, imported the structure to connect to the target, that is STG database. You need to create a ODBC connection. We created the ODBC connection. Using that ODBC, we connected to the database to import the table structure. Then in the mapping designer, we created the mapping. Then in the workflow manager, we created the session, assigned the connections for the source and target. We don't need to create the connections again because it is from the same SRC database and STG database. We have already created it. So we assign the connections and change bulk to normal and load the data, execute the workflow by creating that session in that workflow. Then we monitored in the workflow monitor and access the session log file to see the data loaded correctly or not. Then we created another mapping, that is the business case 2 for STG_payment. For the data is coming from source_payment table. So in the designer tool, under the source analyzer, we define the structure of the source. We have imported from the database of SRC. To import it, we have imported from the database by using the same ODBC connection for SRC, and we imported the structure. In the warehouse designer, we imported the structure of STG_payment using the SPG ODBC connection. And then in the mapping designer, we created it. Then in the sessions, we assigned the connections, changed the bulk to normal, and we loaded the data. But one thing very clear, Informatica server, when the workflow is executed, Informatica server is the power of the Informatica. The data processing is done by the Informatica server. It extracts the data from the source. For that, it needs to connect it and gets the data, complete data from the source onto the Informatica server where you have installed it. Then it will do the row by row process of the complete data and loads the data into the target. So this is what we have reviewed and we have done in the chapter 3. Now coming to the chapter 4, we will discuss the architecture, the power center, power channel, create a mapping, then your source is a flat file, and execute it when your source is a flat file. So in the chapter 4, first we will discuss the architecture of Informatica. As we discussed before, Informatica is a company name. It has different products. So Informatica is a company name. It has different products, the ETL space. So in the ETL space, there's PowerMart is one product, Power Center is another product, and Power Center RT. Informatica sells 3 products used to sell, but currently it sells 2 products called Power Center and Power Center RT, the ETL space, main products. Current version of Informatica product in ETL space is 8. We will be training you on version 7 of Power Center. So we are going to discuss about the architecture of 7.1. Informatica sells this Power Center 7.1 architecture. It has 2 servers. Means basically this product has 2 components. One is server component, the other is client component. In the server component, there's repository server and Informatica server. And in the client component, it has designer, workflow manager, workflow monitor, and repository manager. And whenever you install the server, repository server or Informatica server, when you install the server component, it needs a relational database, which we call it as a repository, in which it will store its system tables. Informatica's system tables will be stored in this repository. And in the repository manager, is used for administration purpose to create the users, privileges, backups. But all this will be stored in the repository, but the connection is through the repository server. Means the repository server is the one which links between the client tools, Informatica server, and the repository. So in the designer tool, you will develop the ETL program in GUI based, and when you save it through the repository server, it will be saved into the repository. The communication between the repository and the client tool is through the repository server. The workflow manager, you create the session and you create the workflow. You create and schedule it, the workflows. All this will be stored in the repository through the repository server. And when you execute the workflow, that information is also stored in the repository, and internally Informatica server will get that information to process that workflow. Workflow may contain single session or multiple sessions. Then Informatica server picks that information, connects to the source, extracts the complete data into the Informatica server. Row by row, it will process the data and loads the data into the target. While doing this process, using the workflow monitor, you can monitor it, but the communication is through the repository server. This is the architecture of Informatica 7.1. Regarding the Power Plug and modeling tools, which you see in this figure, Power Plug is a third-party tool, and Informatica, for example, your source tables or your target tables are not yet in the database, but in a Erwin tool or rational rows modeling tools, they are called. It is in the logical model, not the physical model. Then when you want to create the mappings, then you will use the Power Plug third-party tool, getting from the modeling tool. It is not predominantly used, but Informatica will give you this Power Plug, but it has this third-party tool different. So this is the architecture of Informatica. So repository is nothing but a relational database, which is managed by the repository server. In that repository, you will store information which is used by the server and the client tools. Whatever you do through the client tools or Informatica server will be stored in this repository. Then using the designer tool, create the source, you create the target, create the transformation, build the mapping. Using the workflow manager, you will define set of instructions to create a session and a workflow and to execute that mapping built in the designer tool. The workflow monitor, you can monitor it. You can see the monitoring by a Gantt chart or a task view. And the repository manager is allowed for administration purpose. So Informatica, as I said, Informatica client and Informatica server will access the repository database tables through the repository server only. This is the heart of management of Informatica. That is the reason when you access the client tools, the repository first time, you need to give the repository server information, that is the host or the IP address and the port number where that repository server is installed. And this repository can manage multiple repositories, maybe on different machines on the network. But how will it manage? Multi-user environment, how will it manage? One user is creating a mapping, one user is creating one user workflow. So administrator is creating different users. Informatica server is processing the data, taking it from the repository, and but all the communication is through the repository server. So it has a multi-thread concept. That is nothing but agent, a repository agent, which will be using the multi-thread concept for inserting or retrieving or updating from the repository database tables. So repository server contains a multi-thread concept of multi-agent or repository agent to do the multi-threading process. So, but the final data processing of getting the data from the source, transforming the data and loading the data is done by the Informatica server. The key for Informatica tool is the Informatica server, which does the whole data processing. So this is all about the Informatica 7.1 architecture. And the requirements, system requirements, client tools can be installed only on the Windows environment, whereas the repository server and Informatica server can be installed on Windows or Unix or Linux of different Unix flavors, but whereas the client tool is only on Windows environment. And repository database on any Oracle, Sybase or Informix or DB to any RDBMS can install its system tables. That database can be installed on Unix or Windows environment. So while installing the repository server, it will install the system tables in the repository. So this is the basic system requirements for the Informatica tool. Then the difference between these products. In the ETL space, as I said before, Informatica has three products called PowerMart, PowerCenter and PowerCenter RT. PowerMart is like a vanilla flavor. It's a basic ETL tool which now it does not exist in the market. Informatica discontinued it from this version 7. But the super duper hit of Informatica, which when it came into the market, was PowerMart 4.7 and PowerCenter 1.7. Then they moved on to different products. This is the current version of 8. The future is 9 and 10, which is the R&D phase. The difference is PowerMart is used only when your sources are on a relational database or flat files. PowerCenter, the product, is used which contains all the features of PowerMart, plus whenever you want to get the data from applications, ERP applications like SAP, Siebel, Oracle apps, you want to extract the data from these applications or you want to load the data into this type of application, ERP, then you should use PowerCenter. Because to get the data from SAP systems, you cannot directly write a select statement and get the data from like a, because it will understand ABAP program. I'll give you an example. It will understand an ABAP program to get the data from SAP. But as an ETL developer, you don't need to know SAP ABAP if you want to get the data from SAP. So Informatica provides you with another product called Power Connect. Previously they used to call it Power Connect, now they call it as Power Channel. This Power Connect or Power Channel has the capability to understand the ERP system. So from your designer tool, when you want to connect to SAP system, it has to be connected through this Power Connect or Power Channel. So this Power Connect or Power Channel will work only with the PowerCenter. It will not work with PowerMart. So when your source is SAP or any other applications, you have to use PowerCenter, and also you have to buy the product called Power Connect or Power Channel for different products called SAP Power Connect, Siebel Power Connect, Oracle Apps Power Connect, separate products. Company has to buy separately when its source is SAP or you are trying to load the data into SAP. but that will work only with Power Center or Power Center RT. Nowadays they have two flavors, Power Center and Power Center RT. Power Center RT is real time. That is, they want to get the data as soon as transaction happened in the ER, the source systems. They want to get it into the data warehouse. So in that scenario, real-time data you want to extract from the systems, then you use Power Center RT product. So this is a brief about the different products in Informatica from a ETL perspective. Now we are going to discuss about the mapping, to extract the data from a file, promotions.txt file, load the data into promotions. So the data which is in a file is called as flat file. Flat file, like promotion.txt, called as a flat file. Flat file is nothing but a file which contains data, like your Excel file or a notepad or a .txt file which contains data is called as flat file. So this flat file, promotions.txt, file which contains the data is called as flat file. These files can be of different types. We call it as delimited files or fixed width files. That is, let's take an example, like a file which contains data. It's called as flat file. File contains data, so it is called as flat file. But if you look at the data, you will not be able to understand it. With a one field or multiple fields in this file, by seeing the data, we cannot understand it. Or while extracting the data from this file, Informatica also cannot understand it. It will take it as one field. But actually, look at the data, it has three fields with one header and two rows. So how to differentiate, how to make it as a readable file or understandable file? They are called as, for example, if you separate these columns or the fields, then you are differentiating one field to another field. This type of files are called as delimiter files or separators. The separating from one field to another field is by comma. So these are called comma delimited files or comma separated files. You can create these files not only by comma, it can be a colon separated, semicolon or colon separated, or pipe separated. That is separating one field to another field. So in a flat file, the data column to column, it has to be separated so that you can read the data. Or there are other type of files which are called as fixed width files. Means each field is of fixed length. Let us say this file which has fixed length means, let's say 10 character length file. But if the column is only 5 characters, so it will have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 spaces or blanks to fixed width. Ename is also 5 characters, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then address, and if you enter it, it is called carriage return. Then 101, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Which is 5 characters, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. HYD 102, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Nil 5 characters, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So these type of files, each field is of fixed length. For this example, it is 10 character length. So these are called fixed width files. So when you want to extract the data from a source, then it is a flat file. It can be a delimiter or separator file, or it can be a fixed width file. Delimiter or separator means the same, or fixed width files. Any file which has the data, and if they say it is a comma separator, all the data in that file should be of single separator only. What I mean by that is, you cannot have file which has like this employee ID, comma, ename, colon, address, and employee, and 101, 5. Which is 5 separated, 102 comma separated. You cannot have a file like this. Means any file will have a single type of separator or delimiter, which can be of a pipe or semicolon or colon or comma delimited files, or you can have fixed width files. So in the projects, you may get the data in flat files, which may be comma separator or D or semicolon separator, or it may be fixed width files. Why you will get like this in projects? Generally, what happens in the project, you have multiple source systems. Let's say one is our SAP system is one source, and let's say Oracle Apps is another source, and they may have another application or another source system which has data, another application maybe on Oracle database, but it has very less data, that is percentage. Let's say 1% of the whole source system you have data. So what they do in the project is to give access to this application database. Maintenance will be an overhead for them project. So what they do is, the people who own this application say that they will give you the data in files, in flat files. And there are a lot of utility programs, small utility programs, which will create data in files. If it is Oracle, there is a data loader, the product of Oracle, where you can, using that product, you can create data in files. So when you go into the projects, if you get your source as a flat file, then how to define that flat file structure as a source, and also how to extract the data from the flat files. That is what we are going to discuss with this example of extracting the data from promotion.txt file and loading the data into stg_promotions table. So this is my requirement: extract the data from promotion.txt file and load the data into target. Now, as we discussed in Informatica, to define the mapping, first you need to define the structure. So you define the structure of, if it is a source analyzer, then to define the structure of the flat file, you can create the structure manually for flat files also. And you can create it manually, double click, and like a relational table which you have created, you can create the flat file structure manually. Or you can import the structure of the flat file. To import the structure of the flat file, Informatica provides you in the source analyzer to import the file. But here is one important point which you need to note. The file from which you are going to extract the data, that file with the sample data should be on your local machine. Your local machine file with the sample data has to be stored on your local machine. So we have already sent you the files, and I hope you have stored it under C:\examples, these files. So whenever you want to define the structure of a flat file, you can create it manually, or you can import the structure definition of the flat file, provided you keep the file with sample data on your local machine. So in this example, we have kept the file under C:\examples, this promotion.txt file. Now, how to define the structure when your source is a flat file? Informatica provides you with three-step wizard to define the structure of the flat file. So now we are going to define it. How? Source, import from file. Then you need to go to the path where you have stored that flat file. You have stored it under C:\examples. Change this file type to all files. Then you will see the file promotions.txt. Say OK. So Informatica provides you with a three-step wizard. Is it a delimited file or fixed width file? Let us go and see the file. This is a delimited file separated by commas. You observe this is the comma which is separating each field. So in Informatica you specify, is it a delimited file or a fixed width file? Then, do you want the field names from the first line? Say yes, then you enable this. If you don't enable this, then what happens? We'll see now. Then the next step, what type of the separator it is? Is it a tab delimited file, or semicolon, or space, or comma? Or if it is not any of these four, you go to this other and type the separator, like colon. But for in our case, it is comma delimited file. Then you say next. Based on the field, these are the fields, so you need to specify the field names. You don't take the field names, the first step, that is import the field names from the first line. Then you need to, name the field names, and you start to import at row number 2. As per this file, the data is coming from row number 2. It's from 4. Then you have to specify the row number from where you have to extract the data. Then you say next, comma delimited, next. and now it has taken the field names. It will guess the data type. That is the reason we said sample data is required, because it will guess the data type of text or numeric or date time based on the data. This is a numeric. Sorry, this is a string. That's why it has text or numeric. You can change the data types also, but it will guess the data types. When you define the structure, you say finish. So this is the flat file. It has taken the structure, definition of the flat file structure, only definition, not the data. So this is how to define the structure. I'll do it once again. Source. I will delete this file. Do it once again. Source. Import from file. Go to the path where that file exists, equal class and examples. Then you say all files. Then take the promotion.txt. Informatica provides you with a 3-step wizard. Is it a delimited file or fixed width file? You want to import the field names from the first line. Then next, is it a comma delimiter or a tab delimited file? This is a comma delimiter. Next, it will guess the data types, the text, numeric or date time. Then you say finish. So this is your definition of your flat file structure from class underscore examples. So Informatica provides you with a 3-step wizard. Define the structure. It will guess the data types. It can rename the columns flat file. Then, as per our discussion of Informatica process, you want to load the data into the target table. You can use the ODBC connection. Enter the username password for STG, because STG underscore promotions table we need to take it. Say OK. So this is your structure of your flat file. Then we'll create a mapping. M underscore P underscore STG underscore promotions. Then you drag your source flat file promotions. Then you drag your target. Now, please observe, whenever your source is a flat file or a relational table, to extract the data from relational or flat file, Informatica uses source qualified transformation. If it is a relational, you can write the SQL, or Informatica will write the default select statement. If it is a flat file, you cannot write any SQL or any SQL statements, because on a flat file you cannot write it. So these are all disabled. Grayed out. So to extract the data from a file, it has inbuilt technology to get the data from a file. Whereas if you want to extract the data from a table, you need to write a select statement, which you can write it in source qualified transformation. Now I'll connect this source to the target from my source qualifier transformation. Promotion to the promote ID. I can select multiple columns. The control purpose. Select the drag and drop. So now you save your work. So this is how you create your flat file as a source. Define the mapping. So before you go further down, please, in your detailed specification document, please write down this 6.71 and import the source from C:\class underscore examples, the ODBC for the target table with the ODBC connection, the name and the password. So when you go into the projects, you have the data in a flat file. This is how you define the structure. It can be a delimited or a fixed file. By seeing the flat file, you will understand what type of and all that stuff. But important thing is when you define the structure, the file should be on your local machine. Sample data. Why we need a sample data? Because it will guess the data types. You can create it manually, but need the file so that you can understand it, what the file contains. So you will ask them to send you a sample file in the project to create this structure. I hope you have written this in your ETL specification document. Now when your source is a flat file, how it will work in when you execute this. In Informatica, if you want to execute it, you need to create a session, the workflow manager. Under the task developer, you will create a session. Task, create. Session name, S_M_3_STG_promotion. Then you select the mapping to assign it. Now here is the important point you need to understand. Properties configuration object is the same. Now the connection to the source. If it is a relational, you will assign the connection, but if it is a flat file, how it works. Now please observe our discussion now. When your source is a flat file, how you are going to do it in your sessions. Whenever you are executing a session, when it has the source is a flat file, the rule is the file with the data which you need to extract it should be on the Informatica server. For definition of the structure, it should be on your local machine. For execution, when you execute the session, it has to extract the data. Informatica server needs to extract the data from that file to do the data processing, that ETL processing to extract it. That file should be on your on the Informatica server. You have to ensure, as a developer, you have to ensure that the file is on the Informatica server. How will you ensure? There are different ways we will discuss later, but for this mapping, we will discuss that the file should be on the Informatica server, where the Informatica server is installed. So, where we have created the file with the data on Informatica server, it is under the path on the Informatica server. The path is C:, let me give you the path in a minute. C:\inf_server_src_files. So it is under this path which we have stored the file. For you, in the practical purpose also, on the Informatica server, we have kept the file under this path. So whenever your source is a flat file, for a definition, it should be on your local machine. When you execute the session, the file with that data should be on the Informatica server software that has been installed. In this example, we have kept it under C:\inf underscore server underscore and src underscore files. The file exists there. So let me, in my machine also it is under the inf server src files. Promotion.txt file is there. So now when you do the session, here you need to specify the path. All the source file directory, you need to specify the path. This path is, it will check in the Informatica server, please. So the path, as per our requirement, it is under this. Please look at the path very carefully. The reverse slash So I'll copy this path onto this. C:\inf server src underscore files. Then you give the promotion.txt and the source file type direct by default. But is indirect later. So this is the path of you are representing, you are showing it the Informatica server. This is how you give the connection information for the flat file. Then for STG promotions, the target connection, that STG connection, I have created for STG. I will use my connection, you use your connection, change bulk to normal, and you say OK. Then we will create the workflow. Create WF S underscore M underscore D underscore STG underscore promotion. Then I will drag my session and link the task. And I save my work. Now when I execute this, I say start. Now Informatica server, what it will do, I say execute it. The Informatica server will go and go to the path on the server which we have specified. Then it will extract the data from that file. It is stored on your Informatica server. Extracts the complete data from that file, puts it in the Informatica server, then process the data. So it will go and gets the data from that file. When you execute it, then as per our mapping, it will go and load the data in the target table, that is the STG promotion. Let me check the session log file. So it has extracted 6 records and loaded the 6 records. Let us count in the promotions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 records it has loaded, extracted and loaded into the target table. So thumb rule is when your source is a flat file, you can define the structure. The file can be a delimiter or a separator, that is comma separator or tab delimited file, or fixed width file. Length of each field will be fixed. When you define the structure, you can define it manually, or you can import the file structure, import from the file the structure, provided the file should be on your local machine. And after when you execute the session, you need to give the path where that file is stored. That path should be referred to the Informatica server. So in the on Informatica server where you have installed in one particular path, you have to put a file there. So in our case, we have kept it under C:\inf server src files path. From there, it will extract the data and loaded the data into the target table. Now please open your ETL specification document and please write it down this under 6.8. session name, source file directory, promotion.txt, source file type direct, target connection name stg underscore id, workflow name the wf underscore session name. So this is how you do it when your source is a flat file. With this, I am done with the chapter 4 of the informatica training. Please create the mapping and execute it, check the data.